need for additional Javelin anti-armor systems, which the United States has been providing to Ukraine, I think, as you well know. And they've been used very, very effectively to attack on the Ukrainian homeland. This will be the 6th drawdown of equipment from DoD inventories for Ukraine since August of 2021. Combined with the $300 million military assistance that we just announced on the 1st of April, this will bring the total U.S. security assistance commitment to Ukraine to more than $1.7 billion since the beginning, just the beginning of the run on the 24th of February. There was another billion on top of that, as you well know, at the beginning of the Biden administration. And then more than $4.5 billion since 2014. Along with our allies and partners, we'll continue to work closely with our Ukrainian partners to evaluate their specific requirements to ensure that our assistance meets their highest priority needs as, again, they continue to defend their country. Now, just a programming note, as many of you know from an Army press release that went out yesterday, but I did want to mention it from the podium. The DoD Warrior Games has been scheduled 19th to the 28th of August at Disney's ESPN Wide World of Sports in Orlando. The games, as I think you all were tracking for the past 2 years, had to be canceled because of COVID, about celebrating the resiliency and the dedication of our wounded, ill, and injured active duty and veteran U.S. and allied service members. We're very excited to be able to get the games back in play again. We're looking forward to seeing these Warriors compete. So with that, we'll go with questions. Bob.
Thank you, John. On the subject of U.S. security assistance for Ukraine, I think the Secretary mentioned yesterday during his testimony that the Ukrainians are going to get both the 300 and 600 versions of the Switchblade drones. And I'm wondering, can you say whether either or both of those are anything that has to be, I mean, by that, what I meant was, are they in stockpiles, or are they available, or do they have to be ordered? And also, what about training on that kind of a equipment? Is that required?
We've already sent in 100 Switchblade UAVs that were already in our stocks. We sent them in from those stocks. I don't know where they are in the transshipment process, but they arrived over the earlier this week. So they'll be getting into Ukraine quickly if they're. That's the 100 that President Biden announced a couple of weeks ago. We're in discussions with the Ukrainians about future use Switchblade drones, and of course we'll keep that option open going forward. I'd rather not get into specifics about each shipment in terms of what variant Switchblade, but we're going to keep talking to them and working with and helping them get additional ones if they need it. Now, this is not a system that the Ukrainians typically use, so a little bit of training. It is not a very complex system. It doesn't require a lot of training. An individual could be suitably trained on how to use the Switchblade drone in about 2 days. So when you heard the Secretary and the Chairman talk yesterday about some training that was being done for Ukrainian military members, that's what they were referring to. They were a number of Ukrainian soldiers who were already in the United States and had been since the fall, since well before the invasion, for military educational purposes, and we took the opportunity to having them still in the country to give them a couple of days worth of training on the Switchblade so that they can go back, and they will be going back soon, back home, to train others in the Ukrainian military. And we'll look at that doesn't have to be the end all of it. I mean, we'll look at other suitable opportunities if needed to training on the Switchblades if it's necessary. But that's what they were referring to yesterday.
Okay. So there is either version in full production so that you could readily supply additional?
Well, for the manufacturer, as I understand it, they are capable of manufacturing both of these versions. And just to be clear, one version has a bigger warhead than the potentially penetrating capabilities for, say, armor targets. I won't speak for the manufacturer or what their production line is. My understanding is that that production line is open. They're capable of producing the. Again, we're not going to get into specifics on a day-to-day basis of exactly what variant is going in on any given day, but it is a useful a battlefield system, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they know how to use them and that they can continue to get into the country. Right now, 100 have flown or have flowed in, and we'll see where it goes from there.
John, you're saying that the 600 version has been authorized and is either en route or soon will be on route?
No, I have not. What I've said is I'm not going to talk about the specific variant of it. It is, but if you're asking me, can I rule out that the 600 version, the heavier warhead version, will not be used or won't be sent? No, I'm not going to rule that out.
And in terms of javelins, the $100 million in javelins, the weekend had said that the Ukrainians had received 10 times the number of javelins to the amount of tanks, Russian tanks, in the country. He said that on one of the Sunday shows. They need so many more javelins right now, and I'm just a little confused about that.
Well, I mean, you don't just send a system in based on one potential target. Anti-armor design, it's a missile designed for anti-armor use for those kinds of targets, but it doesn't mean you have to exclusively use it to hit tanks. Used on other vehicles as well, and even fixed targets if need be. And there have been thousands of javelins that we have provided to Ukraine, and we know they're using them. You can see the evidence for yourself, and the images on TV of these burnt-out tanks and burnt-out trucks and armored personnel carriers. You can see the work of the javelin right there. You don't count one to one because they're not being used in that capacity. Yeah.
Thank you, John. I have two questions on South and North Korea. I hope for this.
It's kind of a crapshoot every day, isn't it?
Thank you. As you know, that there are signs that North Korea's nuclear and ICBM launch is imminent. And the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister threatened that North Korea would use nuclear force. If the two Koreas had military confrontations, how do you analyze this Kim Jong-un's threat?
I'm not going to get into a public back and forth with the North Koreans and their threats on the use of ballistic missiles. I will just say a couple of things. We know that they are continuing to try to advance and improve their ballistic missile program. And with each test, whether it's a failure or not, they learn from that. And that's troubling. Number two, we have been nothing but clear. Our concerns about this program, about condemning these launches, they are violations of existing UN Security Council resolutions. And we want the rest of the international community to put exactly the same kind of pressure on the North that we are. And number three, and this is not unimportant, is that we continue to make it clear that we will be willing to sit down with North Korea without preconditions to faith, to find a diplomatic path forward here to reach a better outcome for security and stability on the peninsula. And thus far, the North Koreans have shown no interest in that. So we're going to keep capabilities inside the alliance with the ROK. We're going to continue to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure we have the capabilities on the peninsula to preserve a sense of security there.
South Korea does not have nuclear weapons, but North Korea has nuclear weapons. Have you considered deploying U.S. tactical nuclear weapon for the sake of
I'm not going to talk about
balance between North and South?
Yeah, nice try. I'm not going to get into talking about. I'm just not going to. I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals like that. You know why? Our job is to make sure that we're contributing to the alliance in meaningful, tangible ways to the security of the peninsula and to other allies in the region. And we look at it with that in mind, and we're in constant consultation with our ROK allies. David.
If you allow me, I'm sorry, if you allow me, I have some follow-up questions on that. So this will be the 110th anniversary of birth of North Korea's founder, Kim Il-sung, and South Korea and the U.S. will resume the large-scale field exercises from all this combined, that it is very likely that North Korea will do something more provocative this month. So do you have any plans, or can you share any measures that will enhance military readiness in Peninsula this month? And my second question is, So South Korea's newly elected President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol sent a delegation, policy coordination delegation. And I know they met with Secretary Austin yesterday, and the head of delegation told South Korean reporters that he will discuss a deployment of U.S. strategic assets and resumption of military drills in the peninsula with Secretary Austin. So can you share some of the content of the meeting, or do you have any plans to release radar?
Look, I think the answer to both your questions is to work with our South Korean allies on making sure that our capabilities are appropriate to the threat that's continued to be posed by North Korea and by their ballistic missile program. We're not going to detail all that from the podium, but we're constantly looking at what the readiness requirements are. That's why we constantly consult with our OK allies. Okay, David.
So before yesterday, when the Secretary testified about the training on the switchblades, your response had always been, we're focused on providing Ukraine with the weapons they can use now. Mm-hmm. So now you've maybe opportunistically taken advantage of a chance Ukrainians on an American system. Mm-hmm. Do you have plans to train Ukrainians on other American systems?
Not
This is just a one-off?
That's not a one-off either. I mean, we've identified in consultation with the Ukrainians that the Switchblade is a capability that they can use. It is a difficult system to learn, so we are going to get them into their hands, and we obviously want them to be able to use it effectively. So we took advantage of the fact that they were of them here in the United States anyway to get them up to speed on the program. On the system, and we'll look to see if there needs to be additional training of additional Ukrainian Switchblade. We'll look to see how that might best be done, but I wouldn't call it a one-off. No.
Just the one-off being the Switchblade, or would you train Ukrainian American systems that they could use?
I know of no other American systems that are either being planned to go in or are already in that they require additional training on. Right. So,
when the president went to Europe 3 weeks ago, he spoke about giving, or not giving, but sure that the Ukrainians would have longer range air defense. Where are you on this topic? Did you progress?
We are still actively discussing the possibility with a range of allies and partners for the provision of long-range air defense systems, which are complex systems and which we know that the Ukrainians know how to use. But I don't have anything to announce or report to today.
So there is no progress yet.
I wouldn't say that. I just said I don't have anything to speak to today. Kelly.
Poland on its government website issued a guide to its citizens on what to do if there's an attack, chemical, nuclear. Is there a new concern here or an indication that Russia is planning to move beyond Ukraine, and how will this impact weapon shipments into Ukraine?
You're talking about the threat of chem bio?
Yes, and then just that Poland had issued this new warning, this new guide to its citizens on what to do if something should happen.
We still don't see any indications that that the Russians are shipping in or planning to use chemical and biological. Biden has been nothing but clear about the need for the international community to respond. Well, that would include the United States if they did something like that. We just haven't seen that imminent threat. Certainly fully respect the government of Poland in the way that they want to inform and educate their populace about the potential there. That seems prudent to me. But we have an imminent chemical biological attack inside Ukraine. And as for how that affects the shipment of things on the ground, thus far, and they are getting into Ukraine, and that material is getting into the hands of Ukrainian soldiers. And we want to see that continue for as long as possible. And working with a range of allies and partners there in the region to make sure that we're handling this in such a way that those shipments to flow. And just from the conversation that the Secretary had with Minister Reznikov last week indicated that's happening, that they're getting that material, and it is getting fighters, and it is getting use on the field. And again, You can see it for yourself in the imagery coming out of Ukraine. I would say, and I know you've heard me say this before, and I think we should not lose sight of the fact about how fast, not just the size and scale of the security assistance that the United States alone is providing, but other nations are providing, how fast this is moving. Typically, from the time it gets signed, at least the last couple of security packages, drawdown packages, from the time the president signs it to it actually arrives, it can be as little as 4 days. And then it's not like it's sitting in storage for a week or two. We're able to get this material because we're being so careful and so nimble in how the events are going. We're able to get it, into Ukraine and often into the fight within 48 hours sometimes. I mean, that's incredibly fast. I mean, the 350 that the president signed out several weeks ago, we got that, we got that completed in about 3 weeks. Never been done that fast before. So we're going to keep doing it as much as we can, as fast. We're going to be as careful as we can so that flow can continue, because they're in a very, very active fight, particularly now in the East. Warren.
The 100 million, is that only missiles for Javelin launchers, or are you sending in more launchers as well as more replacement missiles?
I would just say, if you look at what we said, Orrin, it's $100 million for anti-armor systems.
And a question on the one of the things you said you'd send in Friday's announcement, the 300 million. You also said Puma, which is a surveillance drone essentially from the same company that produced. Is that system something Ukraine has already been trained on, or does that also require? Is that also something they'll be trained on currently?
Yeah, let me take the question. I don't know how much training they have on the Puma.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to ask you about AUKUS. That yesterday, the U.S., Australia, and U.K. announced they would work on the developing capability. So what is the benefit of AUKUS cooperation for the U.S. development of hypersonic capability? Do you think such cooperation would expedite the field results?
Will expedite the development of hypersonics? I don't think it's the intent to expedite the development of hypersonics, but I think it's to try to collaborate, coordinate from each other as we work towards improving hypersonic capability. But again, for the United States, we've been working on hypersonics now for many, many years. As you heard the Secretary say yesterday, develop capability. It's something we know we have to stay at it and try to improve. But there's a range, a mix of capabilities that we're going to need for his vision of integrated deterrence, and this is just both. Okay. Let's see, Phil Stewart from Reuters.
Hey there, thanks. Yesterday, it said that the war in Ukraine could go on for years. Is that your assessment? And if so, does that mean that the Pentagon assesses that Ukraine can't win this war, or is that results in continued conflict?
Phil, I don't think anybody knows for certain if the war isn't brought to an end through long it could last. It's impossible to know that. I would tell you that it could end today. It could end today if Mr. Putin did the right thing, sat down in good faith with the Ukrainians, his troops, sent them home, and respected Ukrainian sovereignty. He obviously is choosing a different path. He's going to refocus his efforts on the eastern part of the country, a part of the country, and his private military contractors have been violating Ukrainian sovereignty now for 8 years. The fact that he's going to concentrate in a smaller geographic area, certainly violence will continue. It could even intensify in that part of Ukraine. And because we fully expect that the Ukrainians will keep fighting for this area, which belongs to them, and they've been fighting over it could extend the conflict longer than anybody wants to see it go. But you can't be perfectly predictive about this. And then once the war is over, whenever that is, and whatever that peace looks like, I think you can imagine that going to want to come together to help rebuild Ukraine, and that's going to take some time. Nobody knows for sure. And as for your question about whether they can win or whether we've given up on them winning, or does this mean that they can't win, I think it's going to go for a long time, the answer is absolutely not. Of course they can win this. And if you look at what they've been able to do just thus far, Mr. Putin has achieved exactly zero of his inside Ukraine. He didn't take Kyiv. He didn't topple the government. He didn't remove Ukraine as a nation state, and he's really only taken control of population centers, and even they weren't the ones that he was really going after. So, you know, Mariupol is still not taken. He's moved his forces out of Chernihiv. They haven't taken Kharkiv. They haven't taken Mykolaiv in the south. I think the proof is literally in the outcomes that Ukrainians are bravely fighting for their country, and they have denied Mr. Putin so many of his strategic objectives. So absolutely they can win, and we have to just keep reminding ourselves that there shouldn't need for them to for us to even have to answer that question, because there shouldn't be a war in Ukraine, and Mr. Putin can end it today. Okay, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Did you have one more, Jen?
I do, just on that. Is the U.S. goal strategic defeat of Russia?
The U.S. goal is to make sure that Ukraine can continue to defend itself as they continue to work on a solution here. And then the secondary goal is to make sure that we can bolster NATO's eastern flank so that we can deter any aggression, any potential by Russia and by Mr. Putin. Thanks, everybody. No, I got to go. Thanks. Appreciate it.